Let's get back into 1 Kings. We finished 1 Kings chapter 9 the last time that we were together, last Wednesday. So it wouldn't be the last time we were together, but last Wednesday we finished 1 Kings chapter 9. And we're going to start into 1 Kings chapter 10 this evening. And this is maybe an area that is a little bit more familiar to some of us. The Queen of Sheba coming to test Solomon to come and see if the wisdom that she has heard about him, if all the things, the rumors that have been spreading are actually true. And she's going to make that long journey, and she is going to go and visit with Solomon there at his kingdom. And it's quite impressive, some of the things that we can take away from this text, and quite impressive just how far this Gentile queen was ready to travel to meet Solomon and to test his knowledge and to see this great kingdom of that time. Now, if someone will, go ahead and read for us the first two verses of 1 Kings chapter 10.
Now when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue. Okay. With camels that bore spices, very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I did find a map this go round. Hopefully you can see it. You probably can't see the words, but I can kind of point to things. Jerusalem is way up here. All right, that's where Solomon's at. Sheba, you might be able to see it, is all the way down here at the southwestern portion of Arabia. We're talking about 1,200 to 1,500 miles that this queen was ready to travel. And what is said in the text is that she traveled with camels. So I don't know if that's saying they traveled by camel on land the entire way, or if these ships that they had were large enough to where maybe they could get their camels on the ship and cut some of the time down. But more than likely, we're traveling by land this 1,200 to 1,500 miles. And if they were to do that, I would assume they would work their way all the way up the coastline and then follow the water and continue all the way up to Jerusalem. But 1,200 to 1,500 miles, anywhere from 50 to 70 plus days to make that journey. I remember when I did a lesson at Brown Trail over this particular chapter, and I did a little research and found out it was about as far as from Dallas to Orlando, Florida. You want to make the journey that the Queen of Sheba made to see Solomon? Take off walking from here, Dallas, all the way to Orlando, Florida. That's a pretty good trek. Pretty impressive. The lengths she was ready to go to meet this Solomon to see if all these things were true. Do you suppose she could have sent somebody to find out for her? Probably could have, right? But I think it was so important to her, she really wanted to find out for herself. I guess the fame of Solomon was spreading, and it was so great, the rumors that had been said about him, that she really wanted to find out for herself. So she made that long journey. Now, what had she heard about Solomon? The fame of Solomon. Do you think there's anything to that, the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord? His wisdom. His wisdom. I just wonder if there's something in that as far as it pertains, because it's specific to mention as far as his fame concerning, right? It's Solomon's fame, but concerning the Lord. So it's not only that the fame of Solomon is spreading across the land, but it has direct connection back to the Lord their God. So that is what's spreading even to the Gentile nations. It's not just Solomon, but it's also pointing back to God. Now remember what had already been stated as it pertained to the temple and everything, the possibilities that Jerusalem had and a great impact it could have on all the known world. Well, we're seeing that play out with the Queen of Sheba, 1,200 miles south, 1,500 miles south. You're seeing that at that great distance. Now remember, we talked just a little bit about Ophir last Wednesday. Ophir would have been somewhere right in here. So still a long ways from Jerusalem, but pretty close to Sheba. And remember, they had gone down to Ophir with the ships with Hiram's men, and they had picked up the 400 and something shekels, 400 and something talents of gold, right? So that might have been where the rumors had, how they had actually gotten that far. But now there is news all the way down here to the Queen of Sheba. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, probably they had heard that God was with him, blessing him. And that could have been part of the connection of their names there.
Very likely. You know, it seems as if that might be part of what Hiram, you know, he had that relationship with David, and then he probably would have recognized the blessings that David had received from the Lord. And maybe likely the same thing, they're hearing about it in that sense, and she's willing to make that journey to find out, you know, for herself. Now, what does the text say that she was ready to go do as she got there? Ask him hard questions, right? It says basically that she spoke about everything that was in her heart. What do we suppose that is saying there?
She trusted him. She trusted him.
She trusted him?
Yes.
Possibly. What else? Everything that was in her heart. I don't know if that's just saying that, okay, she just made a very long journey that could have took almost 2 months time or a little longer, and she has had all the time in the world to think about what all I'm going to ask this man when I finally get there. I'm sure it had a lot to do with his ability to raise up a kingdom that is so great, his understanding of how to rule that kingdom, to execute justice and all of the things that would take place for a king. I'm sure there were a lot of questions of that nature that were focused toward Solomon, but everything that was on her heart, anything that she could think of that she could ask this man, she asked him everything that was on her heart. All right, verses 3 through 5. If someone will, please read that.
So Solomon answered all her questions there was in her heart. So Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing so difficult for the king that he could not explain it to her. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seat of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers, and his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her.
Thank you. And actually, I want to go back and ask one more question from the previous verses, verse 2 there, and then we'll start discussing verses 3 through 5. Looking at what it says there, what she came with in verse 2, do you suppose that she was under the impression that it just might be true, all the rumors that she had heard? It seems like it. We're going to have a response from her after the fact, after she gets there and she sees everything, and she's going to tell Solomon, she's going to be pretty open and honest with him and say, you know what, I didn't quite believe it before, but now I sure enough do believe it. But it seems she was at least up to the idea that it could be possible, because you don't bring that much stuff to turn and give to someone else if you don't at least have a little bit of belief in what you have heard. She has brought some great significance of gifts to give to him. The spices, the gold, the precious stones, all of these things she's ready to give over to Solomon. And I think we might be able to answer some of our questions. I think it was Anthea, did you ask last Wednesday after class about what it was important about this 120 talents?
Oh, no, I had asked about Ophir.
Ophir. Oh, okay. Well, my memory's terrible. Ophir is always known for, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, Ophir was widely known for the gold that it had in that area. They were just an area that was incredibly wealthy. And actually, doing a little bit of research today, they had found a shard from a piece of pottery that had a saying on it, something about the gold from Ophir, that is widely recognized. It dates back to like the 10th century, that was found down in southern Arabia. So it would have been around that time frame. It's been known to be a place that has a lot of gold. So likely that's the reason they were going down in that direction.
I'm sorry, was that just a place, like, I guess, was that open to everybody, or was that somebody's territory?
From my understanding, if you kind of looking at what's taken place in this part of the chapter and what we've been seeing, how the fame of Solomon is spreading, it seems like all of these Gentile nations in these cities or whatever you want to call them, they're all turning their attention now toward Solomon, and they're willing to send tribute in a sense, almost as if they're gaining some sort of political relations, you know, being in good favor and good graces of a nation as great as Israel. because we see, we saw with Hiram, he gave the 120 talents. We see, the 400 and something coming from Ophir. Then you see the Queen of Sheba also giving like 120 talents. And I wonder, because you see the 120 a lot, I wonder if the 120 is not kind of like the standard that was given by royalty to another. Maybe, possibly. I'm not sure. But, so, verses 3 through 5, how did he hold up to her questions?
Nothing too difficult for him.
Nothing too difficult. That'd be a little bit disappointing, honestly, for the Queen of Sheba. I mean, think about it. How long did she think up all these questions? And then you get there, and there's nothing so difficult that he can't answer. I don't know. I might be a little bit disappointed that I couldn't come up with a question, at least one to stump him, right? Because everybody's hearing about this wisdom of Solomon, and it seems everybody's going in that direction. And we'll see later in the chapter that that's what everybody's doing. They want to be around Solomon to experience the wisdom of Solomon and to see if it truly is as they have heard. And sure enough, she goes, and what the text states is there is nothing so difficult that he cannot answer. Anything that she had to ask, he was able to explain it. He was able to answer it. So, verse 4, it says, when the Queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers, and his entryway by which the Lord went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. It's not only that his wisdom was evident by talking to him, but it was evident in everything around him. It was evident in the way that he ran his kingdom. It was evident in all of the things that they had and how prosperous they were. There was nothing about that experience that did not point to the wisdom of Solomon, ultimately, which came from God, right? And it's going to be interesting because this Gentile queen is actually going to turn and she's going to glorify God. She's going to praise God for what he has established through Solomon. Now, she doesn't recognize him as her God, but she recognizes him as Solomon's God. But it's definitely going to make an impact on her in this amount of time that she has spent with Solomon. And after all the questions that could have been asked, and after seeing all the food and everything that was on the tables and the waiters, and remember how great that list was of food that they brought in every day? Somebody jump back to chapter 4 and read verse 22 and 23 for us, just to refresh our minds on how much food was coming into the palace or to the house of Solomon.
Now Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 fatted oxen, 20 oxen from the pasture, and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl.
That's a whole lot of food. Every time I read that text now, I'm never going to forget that I went away from that reading and preparing for this class. I went away from that with fatted owl. I have no idea, but that sticks in my mind every time I think about it now. But there's all kinds of food, right? She's seen the wisdom. She's heard everything that he has to say. She saw all the wealth and everything that is around him, and the text says there is no more spirit in her. I assume that's the idea of she is basically just speechless. She's just mind blown that all the rumors could be true, that he could be as wise as everyone has said, and their wealth and everything could exceed even what everybody has said with the rumors that have been spreading. All right, verses 6 through 8, if someone will.
Then she said to the king, "It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes. And indeed, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame of which I heard. Happy are your men, and happy are these your servants, who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom."
So what has changed now with the Queen of Sheba since she has spent time with Solomon? She's impressed. She wholeheartedly believes everything that was said. As a matter of fact, she even goes so much to say that it exceeds the fame which I have heard about you. Happy are your men, and happy are these servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. She says, look, I didn't even believe it at first. But it was so intriguing, it seems, that she had to travel this 12 to 1,500 miles to find out for herself and she at least thought that it could be possible, being everything that she brought with her. Then she gets there and she's mind blown. She's speechless by the time this is over.
If you put this, that little phrase at the end of verse 5, that there was no more spirit in her, and I don't know, I've wrestled with that, you know, because my first thought, well, to put kind of a negative connotation to it, and then I thought about, well, like what you said, you know, she's speechless. But I also thought that, you know, there could be the idea that you don't know what attitude she came in there with.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the before and after of what, before verse 5 and after, you know, there could also be a certain that, you know, now that she has seen this, she may have come in with the idea, okay, I've heard it, maybe he may even be equal to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there may have been a certain level of pride in there that, to her credit, she says, no, he's even greater than what I've seen and heard. And you know, and she, blessed be the Lord in all of this. You know, there may, that may also represent, though, a change in her attitude here that, you know, I'm saying, it's just, no, I'm not quite as special as I thought I was.
I think you're absolutely right, because, you know, that area where they're at there in Sheba and Ophir, it was known in that time to be extremely wealthy areas. And this is a queen who brings all this stuff with her. And I even wondered when I was first looking at the list of things she brought, and wondered if maybe she brought that much just to say, this is how wealthy I am, right? And she's been hearing all this about Solomon, and she brings all of this stuff with her just to try and show him up. And then she gets there and she's just like, wow. You know, I mean, it's pretty impressive. And almost now she's somewhat humbled, it seems. You know, that's one of the bigger things that stands out to me. She seems a little bit humbled in this. Yes, sir.
Some commentators will say she might have came there to learn how to better rule her kingdom and to compare herself to him. But she was overwhelmed and said, I don't compare.
That's right.
She could have been just totally overwhelmed and said, there's no way I can compare to this man.
It seems very likely, and the more times I've read through this, it really does seem like she came with the mindset like, you know what, I'm going to show him, kind of thing. I'll go, I'll check this out. It's worth my time at least, but I'm going to show him. And then she gets there, and it's just like, you know, wow, unbelievable. And that's really what seems like has taken place, because, you know, she has just become very open and honest with Solomon, right? And I think wisdom will do that to us. You think about the state, yes, go ahead.
She probably thought she had quite a bit of knowledge herself,
Mm-hmm.
and was probably overwhelmed that her knowledge, his knowledge, way exceeded hers.
That's right. I'm sure it did. You know, she has done well for herself and well for her own kingdom from everything that I have researched, you know, so it definitely, that's very likely, you know, something that was on her mind coming into this situation. Yes, sir.
We can speculate, you know, there's a little room for speculation about what her motive was in the beginning, but there is no doubt that, you know, when she saw it, she blessed God and knew that God had blessed Solomon beyond measure.
That's right.
And she recognized that most important fact.
Mm-hmm. And it is interesting, her statement that we're fixing to find in the next couple of verses. She's very specific in who she's giving recognition to, or who she's giving glory to. And I find that somewhat impressive for this queen of Sheba. One more thought before we move on into that next section. You know, thinking back to this idea that she has just been somewhat humbled. You know, godly wisdom will do that to people. You think about what was actually stated even by Jesus as it pertained to the Queen of Sheba in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 42. He gave recognition to this queen and how far she journeyed, how far she was willing to travel, and how much sacrifice she was willing to make, and how much she was willing to give of her own goods to go see the wisdom of Solomon. And she recognizes it is God-given wisdom. God-given wisdom or godly wisdom is something that will humble us. I think there's great lessons that we can learn in that for ourselves just the same. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you about 2 Samuel chapter 20, where it talks about Sheba rebels against David. Is this in any way foreshadowing of what comes to pass when the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon?
I'm not 100% certain if this is that's the same Sheba.
It says he sounded a trumpet, and it says it was the troublemaker named Sheba.
I don't know that that is the same Sheba. Preston's giving me the head shake no, so I was waiting to see what he was going to say.
The same place, because this was a male back in 2 Samuel.
Right.
With David, and this is a queen.
Yeah.
with Solomon.
I didn't think it was the same one. I got the go-ahead back there from the back, though. It was definitely not the same Sheba.
Yeah,
But, yeah,
Not the same.
right. Different people. Definitely this is the queen of the area of Sheba. There's been some guesses. And one of the things I noticed when I was doing some research on this queen and of that area, Sheba, there is a lot of different beliefs as to what took place in this visit, but there are all different kinds of religious groups that have some sort of story about the Queen of Sheba going to visit Solomon, much like that of the worldwide flood. Do you know almost every nationality has their own story of a global flood that took place? What's that suggest? That it likely happened, right? Now, all the stories are just a little bit different in nature, but there are all these different stories around the world about this global flood. Well, just the same, you can find all kinds of different stories about this Queen of Sheba going to visit the king of the Israelites. So something else that just kind of stands out and gives us more evidence that, you know, this is something that truly took place. Now, we don't have to know that because we understand that the Word of God is truth and we believe that. But when you're talking to other people and when you're teaching people, it's good information to have to help build that kind of belief. All right, let's go ahead and let's look at what she has to say now to Solomon. Just read, somebody if you will, just read verse 9.
Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you, setting you on the throne of Israel, because the Lord has loved Israel forever. Therefore he made you king to do justice and righteousness.
Thank you, sir. All right, so what stands out the most to you in that verse? The Lord your God, right? We're talking about a Gentile queen, and she specifically says, the Lord your God. She apparently also, there's one other thing that kind of stood out. Is there anything else that stands out there to y'all?
He blessed Israel forever.
What's that?
He blessed Israel forever.
That's right. So she had an understanding of the covenant relationship that God had with Israel, that this is something that has been an ongoing relationship. So she recognizes that in a sense.
Probably the Egyptian, when they were in prison down here in Egypt,
Right.
got out too.
So she knows some history behind the God of Israel, you know, and the nation as a whole, right? Anything else?
She says the Lord your God who is delighted in you.
Right. So Solomon's definitely found favor, and she recognizes that, seeing the blessings that this kingdom has through God. Anything else?
To me, it seems more like she's praising Solomon more than God. Like she has to admit that, you know, Solomon has been blessed. But to me, it's more like she's just agreeing with him, like, oh yeah, you say your Lord blessed you. Well, he did bless you, and he also blessed Israel by making you the king. Instead of like, she's not praising God to me. She's just praising Solomon.
Okay, I can see that because she does get specific to him and saying that he has placed you on the throne. I kind of, you know, my own thoughts, I feel like there's a little bit of both here, that we do see some recognition to what God has established, because it does kind of give the impression that she recognizes this is a relationship that God's had with this nation for a long time. and that he's continued to bless this nation, while also at the same time, in some sense, she's saying, okay, well, praising him because he's there on the throne and what he's been able to accomplish and his wisdom just the same. One of the things that stood out to me is the fact that it seems she understands what Solomon's responsibility is as king to the people, but also to God. You see the last statement there in that verse where it says that he made you king to do justice and righteousness. So she understands Solomon's position as king to offer up or to bring about justice for the people, but to throw in that statement about righteousness, I think it shows a little bit about her understanding of how Solomon was to rule as God's king over his people. I don't know, I thought it was kind of interesting when I read through there, but she seems to have a decent amount of understanding about Solomon and somewhat about God and his relationship with his people. So a lot of good stuff that can be found in that verse and her response to him. All right, let's take a look now at what she's going to give the king. If someone will read verses 10 through 12.
Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in great quantity, and precious stones. There never again came such abundance of spices as the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Also the ships of Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir, brought great quantities of almug wood and precious stones from Ophir. And the king made steps for of the almug wood for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, also harps and stringed instruments for singers. There never again came such almug wood, nor has the like been seen to this day.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't 100% sure how to pronounce it either. I think it's almug. Almug. There's some other ways that it is pronounced depending on your translation. But here's what she has given Solomon. All right, now we're getting a little bit more detail about what it is that she actually brought to give to Solomon. It says she gave the king 120 talents of gold. Now, that 120 is something we've seen, so I don't know if that's kind of the common or the standard giving from one nation to another, royalty showing to royalty, or however that works. Maybe it is the case, but Paul's not here. He normally has the figures on talents of gold calculated over to today's number, but
I think it's like 4 metric tons.
it's a lot. It actually, yes.
10,000 BC.
It's a lot. It was an extreme amount of weight. The dollar amount that I came up with, and I don't know, this is just something I found online, 266 million in gold. So you can only imagine the 400 and something talents that came from Ophir already, right? 266 million. That's a lot of gold. This is the amount that she's bringing to Solomon. Also, along with this amount of gold, she is bringing spices in great quantities, so much so that it had never been seen again to this amount that she has given. Yes, sir.
I'll say all this, these different countries are learning of the wealth of the nation and of King Solomon. And could be they're trying to cultivate trade with him so they could acquire some of that wealth for themselves.
Mm-hmm. It's building relationships, definitely there's a mindset, I think, of, we need to be connected to this nation because of their great wealth, and it may prosper us, just as we have seen Hiram do throughout many chapters, all the way back to David. What's that?
Maybe we can get the overflow.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Hiram seemed to do real good maintaining his relationship with Solomon. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, the value worth of a shekel or a denarii back then compared to a pound of gold, and then the populace involved, just how many people were a part of this movement. Mm-hmm. Not to mention Solomon's influence over the opposite sex, because he had wives and concubines. So it all plays a role in the desire to grow closer to God and show yourself worthy
Well, and
for the child.
everything that God has blessed him with should have made him continue to draw closer to God. But, and a reason that actually in the, I thought I had the title change or named differently. I guess I was thinking something different. But even with everything that we're seeing as far as it pertains to their great wealth, it's going to be his downfall. It's actually going to cause more problems than it does good for him. But, these spices that it says that are in great quantity, I did a little bit of research on those. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just wasn't thinking it through very well. When I first read through that and I see these spices, I'm thinking about stuff that goes on food, right? That was what was on my mind. I'm thinking about spices. I mean, look at how much food he had at his table, right? And when I read through there thinking about spices, and then I actually got to researching the word that's used there, and we're talking more about these saps that come out of trees and plants that create like a resin that were used for medicinal purposes as well as for perfume or things of that nature, a lot like frankincense or myrrh. So that's what is being brought with all of this gold, all kinds of spices that she has brought with her just the same. And then, of course, all the precious stones, and I couldn't find any detail as to what kind of stones these were. Not much that I could find on that, but everything that she has brought is an incredible abundance of things that she has brought to him to give to him, and does so. It mentioned Ophir in there again as far as Hiram going down, the things that we know about that. Incredibly wealthy area. We've already seen the ships that went down there to pick up the 400 and something talents of gold. I know there was a question about the ships and the purpose, that they had. If you continue reading, through 1 Kings and everything that we see with the ships all the way up to the last chapter of 1 Kings, they were always trying to use these ships, it seemed, to move gold or to move goods or something of that nature. And what seemed to be that they're working their way up and down the Red Sea with all their trade connections they had along the way. That was a major part of what they had these ships for, and that's where the ships went to Ophir to get the gold that had been brought back. Yes, sir.
I feel like something we can learn from the Queen of Sheba here is just the insanity of her generosity in that, and I know you touched on it, but to give that much to somebody of already great wealth and esteem and power, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. It really is, and I have a point I hope we're going to get to before our time runs out that is really on the lines of what you're talking about there and what she was willing to give in this, time that she spent with Solomon, but we'll get to that here in a minute, but definitely a good observation. The almug wood, I tried researching that a little bit. It's what I found is beautiful wood used for specialty projects and things of that nature. It was something that they had in great abundance, but we see that it was used for some very special projects, harps. Some say more like kind of like a guitar type setup, but even for steps going into the temple. So use that for special things, whatever it was that they were desiring to use it for, but that's all that she was willing to give. Now, let's go ahead and look at verse 13. Do you have another question?
Yes, sir, I have a question. Where it says in verse 12, where you're talking about the harps and stringed instruments for singers,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of setting would those singers be using these? Would it just be for just recreational music?
Well, we know there was some even, and I want to study this particular thing out more. It seems that there was a lot of instruments used in parts of the acts of preparing for worship before the sacrifices were offered up. There were a lot of things that were done with the musical instruments, but it's like as soon as the sacrifices were offered, it wasn't, that there wasn't any kind of music or anything of that nature done anymore, but it definitely had its part. I've actually had it on my mind to study that out more and have a lesson that somebody gave me. I've just been waiting to find time to listen to it so I could get more information on that. So we'll get back to that hopefully. All right. let's go ahead and look at that last verse. Let's see what Solomon does in return. Verse 13, if someone will, please read that.
Now King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired, whatever she asked, besides what Solomon had given her according to the royal generosity. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants.
All right, thank you. So how much did Solomon give her in return? Everything she asked. Everything she asked, even beyond what was the common tribute that was given from one nation to another, the royal generosity that's mentioned there. So he gave her that plus everything that she had asked, he was willing to give her. Now, looking at this in the sense that even on the point, or what Jesse Lee was saying a while ago, and how she was willing to give so much to this kingdom. She was willing to sacrifice of her own time, sacrifice of her own goods, and give all of this to this kingdom. Now remember the statement that was made by Jesus in Matthew chapter 12. There's one greater coming. To what lengths, to what ends, to what sacrifice will we make in order to gain the knowledge and the wisdom that is provided through the Son of God to the eternal King? This woman went well out of her way. She made a very, very long journey, so much so that Jesus uses her as a reference when she's talking to some of the scribes and Pharisees, saying, look, she's going to stand in the judgment and condemn y'all because she was willing to give this much. She was willing to travel that far. How much are we willing to give today? How much are we willing to sacrifice today? We have the knowledge of God written down here for us. How much effort are we willing to put forth? How much sacrifice are we willing to make in our own lives so that we can say, yes, I'm living a life that glorifies His name, that is pleasing in His sight, that will draw others to His kingdom? There's a lot that can be said about this queen and what she was willing to do to make that journey and to get there and to realize that everything she had heard, it wasn't even the half of it. I promise. Everything that we can give Him, we get there, we won't even know the half of it once we get there. Once we see it, anything we could possibly imagine today, it won't even be the half of it. That's how great the blessings of God and the blessings through Jesus Christ and that kingdom, the eternal kingdom, will be for those who are willing to make the sacrifice. Yes. Mm-hmm.
When you have all that money and you don't have anything really to hope for because you have everything, what need do you have for God?
Yeah.
Comes down to it.
I really wonder if that is, I've thought very similar to that, because this next section that we're going to get into here is what I have titled Undeniable Wealth. We're fixing to see just how wealthy Solomon is and how much he had coming into him every year. And it seems like he got very dependent upon that and less dependent upon God, and it wound up pushing him further away from God rather than all the blessings that God had given him, continuing to draw him closer to Him. So it does seem like it's very much part of his downfall. We'll go ahead and we got 4 minutes. Any other thoughts or questions before we look at just the first couple of verses of this next section? Yes, sir.
Building off of what Andy had said, that idea of him being so wealthy to the point of not having anything to hope for, that gives us a reason to be content with what we have without, I don't know, it was mentioned last week of not wanting things all the time, being content, and that gives us, that still leaves us that hope for better things to come.
Yeah. And you think about the text where it talks about more difficult for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, right? That text there, and just how this kind of wealth, how much of a problem it can cause. It just changes a person's focus. It changes their, outlook on a whole lot of things, and it definitely has spiritual ramifications, if a person's not careful with their wealth. Now, it's not always the case, but it definitely plays a factor. All right, let's go ahead and look just to see how much Solomon has coming into him, verses 14 and 15, if someone will please read that.
The weight of gold that came to Solomon's yearly was 666 talents of gold. Besides that, from the traveling merchants, from the income of traders, from all the kings of Arabia, and from all the governors of the country.
Thank you, sir. 666 talents of gold. If my math is correct, 1,478,000,000. No, wait a minute. Let's see. Yeah, 1,478,746,563 in gold a year is what's coming into this man. This is his yearly income.
That's under today, though.
That's today's figure, right? This is today's figure of what that would equal up to. This is like the Elon Musk, if you will, of that time frame. I think he's probably somewhere in that ballpark of what he has a yearly income. It's incredible that he could have that much wealth in that time frame. That's what's coming into this man. Now, remember, even all the way back to Deuteronomy, what was said to these kings? Do not store up for yourself gold, right? What's it seem like he's doing? Storing it up. We're fixing to see, once we get to next Wednesday or next class, what he does with some of this gold, and it shows how much extra he actually has. Yes, sir.
Just a question, how much is 666? Does that have, as far as that number 666? Is that
Like a revelation.
I think it's just a number that was given. That's just I don't know that it has any kind of anything that would be like numerology or anything of that nature. More just a number that was given. This is how much income that was actually coming into him. Well, that gets us into 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 14 and 15. We'll pick back up on those. I wonder if Solomon said a whole bunch of proverbs to her. You think that might have been something that had her kind of speechless? Just a whole bunch? Maybe, I don't know. All right, thank y'all.